Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us today on Tech Biz Toolkit. I'm so excited to have someone so influential in the music industry join us today. You've had a remarkable career in the music industry. For those that don't know you, I really would like you to explain what first drew you into this world and what keeps you passionate about music even today.
I started in the music business when I was 16 as a roadie was my first kind of point of entry. I was obsessed about music, had to be involved in any which way. And I was involved in a free festival, hippie free festival. One thing led to another, and I got invited to roadie for a band called Motorhead at their very first ever gig. And I then went on the road for 2 or 3 years as a roadie. Learned a lot about how, life on the road was, obviously changing the guitar strings, setting up the drums, driving overnight to the next shows, doing it all again, getting extremely tired and exhausted, but, learning a lot about the day-to-day of the live side of the music industry. 19, I saved up some money, wanted to start. It was kind of at the moment then there was a lot of independent labels, record labels that were starting, and it was a DIY kind of culture. And I started putting out 7-inch singles of artists that I really liked. And eventually, some of those artists that I had on that little label, things started to happen for them. And I found myself being the manager of some of these artists. So I ended up becoming an artist manager around age 20, 21. So
Wow.
I've been doing that for a long, long time, but that developed into managing record producers and songwriters. I was lucky enough to take on Tony Visconti as my first ever producer client. He was David Bowie's producer. So she's still there. It's called Dean Street Studios now. But I learned the art of I watched the art of record production from afar in the studio with him, but I learned the art of managing record producers, which was quite an unknown thing at that time. There wasn't really anybody doing it. So I found a little niche, and that niche really kind of worked for me. And at that time of the music industry, it seemed to work for the music industry as well. So I built up a client list of quite amazing producers and developed that over a number of years, took on some more artists, then eventually got into the live side of the business when I merged my company with one that had some live music venues. And then I ended up co-owning some music venues in London. We had the Jazz Cafe and the Borderline and the Garage and the Academy, which was called the Barfly back then, and a few others, and did that, and then started a music festival in India, which became very, very successful. It's called the NH7 Weekend. It's still going on today. It's like 15 years later. And then during that period, I hooked up with Damon Albarn, and we created a project together called Africa Express, which is a musical collaborations project between African artists and Western artists, taking well-known Western artists out to Nigeria, Ethiopia, Congo, Mali, South Africa, recording albums over there, putting together shows of musical collaborations, bringing them back over here, doing Glastonbury, Roskilde, various festivals, and all sorts of interesting sort of live events that we put on over the years. So, I've been doing that for almost 20 years. So it's been a busy, extremely busy career, entering into a period in the music business, which is, music business has always been an extremely fast moving business and one of the earliest adopters of new technology. And, you could say that the two businesses that are really at the kind of cutting edge before anybody else really falls in line is the porn business and the music business. Means that technology sort of gets developed there first, I don't know what's happening in the porn business in relationship to what we're going to talk about AI, but I do have an inkling of what's going on in the music business in relationship to it. So we can talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good segue to actually my next question. So from your perspective, how is AI currently being used to create music, and what excites or worries you most about the shift?
Well, I mean, already producers, songwriters are using it as a tool in various ways. Obviously it's coming up with as a music creation tool in the process, and it's helping speed up the process of songwriting, the process of record production. I don't have issues around that, right? I think that's healthy. I think the important thing is for producers, it's giving people a range of options and opening up the range of options, an open range of possibilities for creation, which is good. And I don't have personally an issue with creators using it in their day-to-day processes. Where I have an issue is where people who are perhaps not music or who are not musicians, right, who are sitting there at home and they're putting in a prompt and using, Suno or whatever, and coming up with a song idea, which takes like 15 seconds of a couple of prompts, and then using, ChatGPT to come up with a fake image of an artist and, using a combination of different AI tools to create something that's completely fake, right?
Yeah.
And then
lyrics.
Lyrics.
Yeah.
Of course, putting that up on, and some of it can be very creative in a sense, but I have an issue with that stuff being monetized. If it goes up onto Spotify or onto Deezer or whatever, I think it's wrong that should be generating payments, which is diluting the pool of money which is available to people who've turned over their lives. Real artists who've turned over their lives to music creation. And I think that is an issue that is problematic. I've been quite vocal online talking about this, and which has been part of a sort of trend amongst music professionals who want to see Spotify and the other DSPs take action. Some of them have already taken action. Deezer have demonetized, have targeted and demonetized tracks that are 100% AI. We're not talking about tracks that have a partial AI element, with tracks that are 100% AI. And I'm hoping that Spotify will meaningfully follow suit in relationship to that. So there are now, tools available that can monitor and track the level of AI that's been a part of the technical creation of a track.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm hopeful that, because things are moving at such a pace, I'm hopeful that this issue can be minimized over the months to come. And, if we're sitting here in a year's time, maybe, that it's going to be a lesser issue. I think that, AI music itself is here to stay, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
And we will see AI music being used more and more in advertising, in circumstances that was previously the zone of Muzak,
Yes.
And royalty-free music will kind of have its place in social media, online advertising, where people just pay a very small fee to license that track, or maybe don't. Maybe it's just free. It goes up free, and people, I think the registration of, there will come a time when some people will be offering a way of registering those kind of tracks so that they can keep a of how they're being used and whether they can find ways of monetizing them or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask you on that actually, Stephen. So obviously we have PRS. How would that work with today's, AI music? Are they doing anything at the moment to help with the new, obviously, ways of music in regards to AI? Are they monitoring that?
I'm sure it's a constant conversation, but the thing is that tracks that are 100% AI, shouldn't be able to be, registered as a written song, in my humble opinion. I'm not quite sure what the PRS scenario exactly is on that. I mean, these industry discussions are happening on a sort of day-by-day basis. I'm part of the Music Managers Forum. I used to be the chair of the MMF, and I certainly know that there are working groups within the MMF who are in the process of engaging government in conversation, and it's certainly a absolute top of the table kind of forefront conversation within the industry itself about how to address all this. I mean, producers are going to be using AI for demos and sound design. Editing and mixing, all good, no problem with that. That leaves them sort of free to focus more on performances and the vibe of what it is they're producing. And artists are going to be using it more and more to arrange music in a way that perhaps was a little bit beyond them before, right? But give them a feel and perhaps a template that they can use to direct sort of musicians. But the big sort of shift anyone can make, anybody can make that kind of music now. So what matters most is really the kind of like the identity and the vibe of what a musician ultimately will create. Whilst AI is going to get better and better and better, people know when there's real soul involved. I'll be very interested to see if an AI track, there's certain songs, I'm sure it's true for you, it is certainly that can bring you to tears. You hear that, it goes,
emotional connection.
You don't know how it's reaching you, but it's reaching you on a personal level, taking you into a different place.
Yes.
Now, don't know if AI is going to be able to do that somehow, but we'll see.
It will.
We'll see.
I think
we'll see.
Being that I working obviously in technology and I've seen how everything is moving so rapidly, like most people that are really interested in AI, we listen to a lot of the creators of AI and even their concerns about how rapidly this is coming into play in a lot of industries. My concern is that the real artists are not going to make any money because maybe perhaps the younger generation, especially, start going towards the AI, like in that type of music. Then what does that mean for the future of existing artists? That's always been a thought of mine.
Sure. I mean, obviously one thing that AI is not going to be able to do, although you can put out sort of like avatars and things, but, going and performing live, and showing people, just why you as an artist are so special. I went to a lot of festivals this summer, and it's so encouraging for me to see young kids who've never been to a festival before and probably whose experience of music has been, restricted to, YouTube, suddenly being exposed to seeing real musicians play real instruments in real time. And, the jaw-dropping moment when they realize, oh, my God, the difference between watching somebody actually play a sax or watching somebody actually play keyboards and drums in a real way, as opposed to kind of, they just haven't experienced. But when they do, it is like such an overwhelming experience for them that it becomes a real different way for them to experience music. And it's a real different way, an engagement.
Yes.
I'm counting and hoping that will be big enough to sustain the ongoing interest in real music.
I agree, because even when I go to festivals or concerts or private shows, whatever, seeing a live band, the connection you receive is so much more different to when you're in your house listening to music. Seeing the artist's facial expressions, even when they sometimes start to conversate with the crowd because maybe they're going to go into a song and they talk about how that song might have inspired them, for example, all of that sort of thing would be missing with AI. I'm just very concerned for really amazing artists that I know of, especially in the UK. I worry for their future, and I really hope that, like you said, people still appreciate real art.
Look, I'm not going to diminish it. It's harder and harder for musicians to make money anyway. Right.
Yeah.
And there, of course, there are different levels of musicians. There are those people who want to have a career playing music live, want to make records, and are happy if they can just sustain themselves enough to do that. And there are those artists who, really are about, I've got to work with a major label. It's got to be an international, significant pop success on a very grand, and that's what their target is. And, it's going to be interesting to see how AI affects either of those kind of scenarios. I think that AI can be useful for artists to help them with like breaking writers' blocks, and everybody gets that from time to time, trying out new sounds that you wouldn't normally have access to and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the danger is AI in the creation process. It's laziness. I mean, artists who use it to explore and push their own boundaries a bit, I think they're gonna they're gonna thrive, and it'll be a very useful tool. But those who use it to copy and just then they're gonna fade fast. I think that you'll hear AI music, and the AI music I've heard so far always gets bits wrong. It kind of
I've heard that myself.
It gets the mix wrong. It gets certain bits just kind of like don't feel right. Although it's good at generating ideas. Anyway,
But on that note, why do you think, and talking about the financial aspect, why do you think record labels now are paying for AI artists? Because I saw there was this latest AI artist. It's the same face all over social media. I can't even remember her name because I
yeah, I
don't
saw that.
believe that a record label would pay this much money for this AI artist. But why do you think they're offering so much money now?
I don't know how accurate that report was. I mean, the press love to latch on to something, and
They do.
they've done a 10-album deal. When
Yes.
in effect you're doing a 1-album deal, and there are options. So that's been an age-old thing in hype
Yeah.
marketing. I'm not. I mean, I saw that. I even clicked on a clip of that and watched it. It was. It was okay, but why, there are far superior real musicians out there than this.
Yeah.
I can't speak to that particular project, but, if somebody's got angle, if there's a cartoon-based TV series or something like that, which can be created using AI, and, there's music related to that, and it's an overall package that has, potential merchandising aspects of it, then maybe it's to do with that. But
Yeah.
I think if a human controls the sort of creative direction, then they should keep the rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if music's generated entirely by AI, I really don't think there should be any sort of copyright involved in that at all.
Yeah.
Copyright should be retained by human beings.
Yeah. Because speaking of that same artist that I'm talking about, I was on TikTok and people were actually talking about her music. And a lot of people were saying they actually felt an emotional connection to her music. What you were saying earlier about that emotional connection. If AI can create that for individuals, what does that look like for the future?
Who knows? I don't have an answer to that. What I do think is that AI got trained on real music, and you can bet your ass the people that it got trained on are not going to see a penny of that.
Yes.
Right. So, that to me is kind of immoral in a sense,
Yeah, I agree.
think a lot of tech does not like copyright. It doesn't like protecting it. From what I understand, a lot of the AI models were trained on out of Chinese library sites, which don't respect copyright. So, anyway, I just think that's wrong.
Yeah, it's like getting an AI agent and training it on someone like Timbaland, for example, big music producer in the US. And then they're able to churn out music just like his, a lot faster and more rapidly than a human. That will be in their own proper studio creating music from scratch. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And if you was in a position to make a decision how people get paid if they're using AI, as you said, whether it's a tool or using a whole song as an AI creation, how would you think payment should be made to those individuals that are using AI versus a normal artist?
Sure. I mean, look, if it's being used as a tool, like I said, I don't have an issue with it. I remember when synths started becoming ubiquitous in music production. I mean, back in the 80s, there was a lot of guys who were members of the Musicians Union at that time who were throwing their hands up in horror going, synthesizers are going to replace us. There was a lot of, specifically by the Musicians Union at that time, to ban synths being used. Same with drum machines, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, look, you can't stop progress. What I do think, and as I said before, I don't have an issue with producers, songwriters using it in there as a tool, but it's where my pure negative issue is with those people who are just creating 100% AI-driven tracks.
Yes. Yes.
And then trying to get those monetized on DSPs that would normally feature just normal artists, normal musicians, and that's diluting the pool of money that get to everybody. So if there's hundreds of thousands of tracks coming in, which are fake tracks, I mean, how many of them are going to get many listens is another matter. But it's clogging up the system.
I agree with your way of thinking. I always say on this podcast, I've said it to many people, AI is a tool. Use it cautiously. I do get a bit peeved when I am online and I'm hearing tracks that sound like Drake and it's 100% AI creation. I think it's a damn right liberty, if you ask me, to be fair. But I don't know if I'm biased because I love music and stuff. So I used to do music production, so my mindset would be a bit different. I've got young nieces and nephews, and they listen to anything that just kind of gives them a buzz, or there's some lyrics in there that they can relate to. And they just will, I like that song because it says this, and I can relate to that.
And, you have a personal relationship with the artist, when you become a
Yes.
fan of that artist. It's like, I mean, the most extreme examples being, Taylor Swift or the Korean, K-pop artists or whatever. You can see the absolute visceral connection. But, I mean, there I was last night in the Palladium in London, seeing an artist who's in their 70s who I grew up with as a kid, who to me is an absolute hero. And I'm having a very emotional bonded experience with that artist. That, cannot be replicated by AI. But maybe we will all be marrying robots in years to come. Who knows?
I won't be, certainly not. But yeah, we'll see a lot of people that we probably think will be marrying robots, to be fair. I know we spoke a lot about AI. You've really covered a lot. So thank you very much. It's so good to have an insight from someone that's been in the industry and has your expertise. One of the things I wanted to kind of touch on now was moving on to real music, and I'm going to call it real music, as in real artistry. What do you think the next genre that's going to be big is? I love Afrobeats. I saw how Afrobeats came into play. Everyone jumped on it. Do you think there's going to be another genre, the next sort of trend? And if so, what do you think that might be?
I've noticed, there's several things going on at the same time. I mean, obviously the rise of sort of Spanish influenced music is incredible, and you've had the bad, all of that kind of stuff. I think that's going to go wider and bigger and deeper, right? So I think, we will see a lot more of that coming through over the next 5 years, right? I also think that, funny enough, drum and bass is going to have a resurgence. It's already, you can see it sort of bubbling at festivals, and there's a lot of young drum and bass, especially women drum and bass producers and artists coming into play. And I think that's going to raise up over the next couple of years.
Wow, I didn't know that. This is great.
Absolutely. There's half a dozen, maybe a dozen female drum and bass artists coming through. And that's kind of, from Nia Archives and people, and Sherelle and people downwards. It's kind of, it's gathering pace in popularity. But the other one I think that has been over the last 5, 6, 7 years has really kind of picked up pace. It's kind of where jazz meets hip hop, where jazz meets R&B, the kind of the Jordan Rakais of this world. You see that kind of musical influence, coming into new albums by people like Dave, J Huss. I wouldn't be surprised. Kano. I wouldn't be surprised if, Stormzy's next album has more jazz on it. You're seeing that kind of vibe really influencing. But there's a whole kind of scene, particularly London, Leeds, Glasgow, Bristol, Brighton, where small little jazz venues opening up, underground jazz venue, young kids playing it. Really exciting. I go to lots of clubs in London, every single week, where I'm seeing, artists in front of like a couple of hundred people, and it's a 50 mixed audience, a mixed race audience, if you like, which I think is brilliant. And the artists being inspired by some of the sort of jazz greats. And when I say jazz, I don't mean like kind of like, smooth kind of jazz FM type. I mean, a bit more sort of experimental and a bit more danceable and a bit more kind of like out there and in your face.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So that's kind of coming through. And on the other hand as well, I think with guitar music, I think that's been very quiet for the last 5 years. Hardly any kind of rock coming through, but I think that's going to change. The Last Dinner Party being a good example of an English all-female rock band. And I think we're going to see more kind of women-led bands coming through.
That's brilliant. And that's actually inspirational. It's so good to see women really taking their artistry as a musician seriously and progressing with it and getting seen finally. Because I know a lot of great female producers doing great things behind the scenes, but not everyone might know their name, like many songwriters. In regards to artists in the UK, what artists do you think people need to look out for next?
I would listen out to the forthcoming Nubian Twist album. Trust me, and I'm very biased, I might have some involvement I would listen to that. I think that's, particularly exciting. Gosh, I wish I prepared for that question because there's so many young, really, really interesting young artists kind of coming through. Again, I kind of focus a lot. I mean, Yasmin Lacey's new album is absolutely brilliant. I would check her out if you don't know her already. She's a young black jazz singer from the Midlands who's based out of London, but the music she's creating is kind of Sade-esque.
Oh,
Vibe, and I think a lot of people will respond to that. I think she's a big tip. Another girl who is creating really special music is an artist called Momoko Gill. She's again coming from that kind of jazz thing. I mean, I like Olivia Dean, but everybody knows about her already. So
yeah,
she's
yeah,
certainly kind of like exploded in a really healthy way. But I
yeah.
mean, there's no shortage of really exciting talent that's kind of
Mm,
like just kind of getting on the tracks now.
yeah. What advice would you give a new artist that wants to get into the game right now, today? What advice would you give them?
I think one of the oldest bits of advice that I ever heard, and maybe I even invented it myself, I'm not quite sure, is, everything in the music business, right, revolves around one thing to get it going, right? And that one thing is the chorus. Okay. So if you don't have a chorus, that people can attach themselves to, or you don't have a melody line, if you're an instrumental artist, it's, it's about the chorus, get that right.
Mm,
And you build so much around that. Careers get built off the back of choruses. There's so many songwriters out there who can write a great song with a great verse, but when it comes to the chorus, it's like that's the thing that people are going to kind of identify with, emotionally attach themselves to. So don't forget to focus really on getting that chorus right. If you get that right, so much else in your musical career can fit together around that, right? I mean, obviously, the learnings that are available to artists now are far greater than they've ever been. Online resources, organizations such as the Featured Artists Coalition, the Musicians Union, PRS Foundation. There are dozens of organizations, Help Musicians is another one, who are set up to support and give information, learning, teaching and guidance to musicians that never existed before. So there's a lot that you can do yourself. There will come a time as an artist when you're going to want to find a good manager. That a good manager and creating a team around you, you cannot possibly do everything yourself. So you're going to have to create a great team. And, you have to learn how to trust people, but also you have to learn how to be savvy about picking the kind of people that you're going to have to.
mm-hmm.
So that's extremely important. That hasn't changed.
Yes.
Every artist is going to have to build a team around them. Sure, you can self-release, absolutely. And the more clever you are around that, the more likely you are to succeed in terms of if you're good at thinking up marketing, innovative ways to reach people through social media, whatever. It's a level playing field on that level. You may or may not need a record label, depending on what kind of artist you
Mm-hmm.
are, what your position in the marketplace is, who you're trying to reach. If you're a pop artist, you probably do need a record label, but if you're sort of more left
Yeah.
field, an indie artist or working in a very specific genre, then maybe you don't need a record label and maybe you can figure out how to find and reach your audience yourself. But you certainly are going to need more team members, though. That's for sure. Doing it on your own out of your bedroom is hard. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. It's very hard. And I do think a lot is around, let's be honest, marketing as well, because there's so much competition
for
out there.
sure.
Taking your point about people making sure that they have a really good chorus when they're writing their music, it's so true because me and my friends went out to a festival in the summer and I remember we was all singing along to this song. None of us could even say any of the words in the verse, but when it comes to the hook, we knew the hook.
Right.
So
There
we
you
all
go.
were like, yeah, it comes to the hook, we're like, yeah.
There you
So
go.
it's so true. The hook is so
I
essential,
think
isn't it?
that is an age-old phenomenon around pop music. People can remember the chorus, but can they remember the verse lyric? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Showing off our ages now, Stephen. So, is there anything else that you think people should be aware of in the music industry that maybe is not being highlighted at the moment? Anything more that you think you could educate us all on?
That's not being highlighted at the moment. I just think that the importance of live music, I cannot overestimate what that means to the future of artists who want a career in the music business.
Yeah.
I think live music and that real kind of connection is going to rise in value, right, for artists as AI has an effect on the recording side, which is going to like diminish the value of recorded music. I don't mean that people won't love well recorded music. I just think that, that there's going to be so much music. I think, it's like, will people still be prepared to pay, whatever it is, £15 a month for, a good level Spotify subscription? Don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I'm not sure.
Good
I
point.
think, but they will be prepared to pay £150 to go and see an artist they absolutely love, and if you can build your career and up to a point where you can sell really meaningfully priced concert tickets and sell enough tickets to make it worth, to make it successful, then that is, a substantial career for you.
Yeah. I remember when I was growing up and I was trying to get into the music industry, the two things that people used to say, this is the way that you're going to make money. It was songwriting and live performances, concerts, as you're mentioning now. In regards to the songwriting, what does that look like today? Is that still a good way of people making money, would you say?
Speaking as somebody who manages songwriters, yes, if you have a
Hmm.
hit, but once upon a time when a lot of these records were made up on the wall behind me, the business model was that they would write a lot of songs. They'd be continually writing songs. Maybe they'd be getting album cuts. Maybe they're getting B-sides of singles. And every once in a while, they'd have a track which was a single. And with luck, it would be a hit. Now, you could do that, once a year, twice a year, and that would be enough to sustain you as a songwriter because you're getting cuts on albums and people were buying the album and it's got 10 tracks on it. Only 2 of them or 3 of them are singles, right? The other 7 tracks are album tracks, but you're being paid as a songwriter equally on those album tracks if people are buying the album because it's divided by 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a
Yes.
sustainable business model. Nowadays, because of streaming, people tend to stream
Mm.
and only the singles. They're not streaming albums, right? So whilst
Yeah.
there's a healthy vinyl market, and I'm sat here in a room with 7,000 vinyl albums are dotted
Wow.
around this room, which I'll show you later. Whilst that is still and a growing, it's come back into fashion and more and more people like to have something physical. Nevertheless, the vast, vast, vast majority is just streaming, right? And, unless you have
Mm.
a single streaming multi-million times, you're really not earning much money as a songwriter off the back of that. If you are, you're lucky enough to be that songwriter who has that single that's streaming multi, then you can earn a lot of money off the back of that as a songwriter. But it is tough, and everybody's looking for that lucky break.
Yes, yes. So what advice on that note would you give songwriters, specifically just songwriters that are coming into the industry now? Would it be don't have expectations, don't think you're going to be
Well,
a superstar and a
be
millionaire
aware,
overnight, basically,
just, I mean, you're going to have to have a strategy for keeping yourself alive
Mm.
financially and on the pitch long enough before you have your first hit, right? If you're a pure songwriter and not the artist, the money from that hit will take a while to come through to you. I mean, publishing royalties don't instantly appear in your bank account. They take a while to come through. So you need to have a strategy around how you're going to support yourself whilst you're attempting to create writing sessions with people. And you're going to need to figure out how you can reach out to artists that you can write with, how you can get in the door with them. That's the real challenge, for any songwriter coming in the industry is how can I get in the door with meaningful artists, and
Yes.
you have to think creative ways of doing that, whether it's hitting people up individually on Instagram and trying to follow things through or spreading your risks out in relationship to working with a lot of baby artists and then hoping one of those baby artists comes through and establishes themselves. Also, how are you going to do this? Have you got a studio which you can work in, as a songwriter? Can you play the music as a songwriter, or are you a top line person who's going to need to work with somebody who can create the tracks, and how do you find that? So there's lots of different angles, for songwriters who have different sets of skills. It ain't easy. It's a very crowded market. You're going to have to be very prepared to experience the school of hard knocks, right? Because it's brutal out there. But for those who've got it in their blood and the music is just kind of bubbling within them and can't be contained, for those kind of people, they got to do it. They got no choice. They just got to get on with it.
That's right. Yeah, agreed. They can't stop. And I believe with anything in life, if that is your dream, your passion, just go for it and don't give up. I just have one last question, if that's okay. And it's a bit of a cheeky one. Why haven't you wrote a book?
Do you know what?
Just like you've got one buyer here.
It's been on the list, and I actually started one about 10 years ago. And then kind of got waylaid when I was recording lots of different stories into a voice recorder. Where was I? Antigua. And I was by the beach, and one day I stupidly left the recorder and it got washed out to sea. And it's like, you know what? I'll leave that for a few years. There's a lot of people asking me to do that. And there's a lot of stories that need to be told, and watch this space. Perhaps that's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years.
Some of us have a lot of wealth of knowledge in a certain subject or field. And I just think, why wouldn't we share that with more people? And I know you do interviews, and I know you have a lot of artists and musicians. You always support them by going to all the gigs and everything. I've known that you've done that for many, 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 many years. I just think now you should just tell your story, because I think your book could be easily #1 bestseller. I think you're underselling yourself now, just saying.
Much appreciated, Rochelle. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Just to say thank you so much. I really am so shocked by all I'm hearing around AI, but I do appreciate your thoughts around people using it as a tool. A lot of musicians are going to really appreciate this podcast. They can learn so much. So that's why you need to write that book, Stephen. But anyway, I just want to say thank you.
Okay, my love.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.